So a few months ago, before my channel really started to take off, I made a video about SCP-3935, this thing A Quiet Madness made. It's one of my favorite pieces of internet horror ever. It's one of those stories that just feels so unbelievably haunted to me. It has that quiet horror that I've talked about before, that kind of horror that really kind of creeps into my mind and freaks me out. If you love cryptic, eerie horror or cosmic horror or unexplained happenings and paranormal, ghosty kind of stuff, then you'll really like this one. I'll be explaining the whole story and giving my personal take on it. I just feel like the original video that I made for this channel doesn't fully align with the style of content that I produce now, so this video will serve as essentially an updated version of that previous video. But saying that, this video will be very different from the last one, and this one will be a lot more of an in-depth look at the story, and I will be giving my solid explanation for what I think is actually going on this time around. I'll also be discussing the themes of the story and why it's such an effective piece of horror literature, and why it creeps me out more than any other SCP that I've read about. Because while the SCP wiki is fairly well known, this story in particular is so good that I want to expose it to as many people as possible. And luckily, while my channel isn't huge, it is big enough now that I can force some of you guys to engage with my niche interest that I've been nerding out about privately for years. If you don't know what SCP means, if you don't know what that stands for or what that entails, then don't worry, I'll cover that all later on. It's not really important to know right now. I'll just say that this thing A Quiet Madness made is a work of internet horror fiction that presents itself as the case files of an investigation of a high school being haunted by something. That's a very simple overview of what this is. The reality is much more complicated. We'll be talking about all the bizarre occurrences that happened in this particular school, Salvation High School. Because while this is, to its core, a ghost story, there is far more than a simple haunting going on at the school, and the reason behind the madness is both heartbreaking and terrifying. But before we get into it, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, then please do. I make videos analyzing and exploring horror media, mostly horror literature. I recently made a video on the sci-fi horror book All Tomorrows, and I also make iceberg videos. I'm trying to reach 50,000 subs at the end of 25, and thank you all for watching. Also, shout out to my brother for making this awesome Salvation High School track shirt that I'm wearing right now, class of 1976. It's a custom-made shirt. It's really awesome. Nobody's ever recognized it, but it's absolutely one of my favorite shirts. The way below winds deeper, longer, unspeakable, its patterns laid. The lost forever damned to wander, this thing A Quiet Madness made. The town of Salvation, Indiana is about as innocuous as a town can be, with a population of about 1,400 people, a single high school, and a handful of churches. With a population so small, there was a sense of conformity and unity in the community. Salvation was a place free from scandal, a place where good people raised good children. The high school quarterbacks went on to play second string for state schools, the cheerleaders went on to marry their high school sweethearts, and Salvation comfortably idled and hummed. But to attribute a perfect harmony and cohesion to a town of 1,400 individuals would be a mistake. Where individuality exists, disparity exists, and secrets exist. And these secrets and scandals bubbled under the surface, content to never be addressed by the public, content to suffer in silence and be swept under the rug. But Salvation couldn't hold these secrets anymore, and in June 1976, something changed in Salvation, Indiana, something that has been covered up and relegated to these case files. The people of Salvation have been drugged into forgetting what they experienced, and the town has been abandoned. Any road that leads into it has been rerouted, and the high school has been boarded up. But before all of that, let's go back to June 18th, 1976. It's a Sunday night, and two 10th grade students, Diane Beasley and Cassandra Thompson, are walking home from a Sunday night church service. Their usual route home takes them past the high school, and both of them hear what they can only describe as someone trying to speak under the ground. Cassandra reports this to her mother, who ignores it. Ignoring things is going to become a huge theme of the story going forward, so watch out for when that happens. Monday, June 19th. During gym class, 11th grade student Oliver Baker claims that he can hear voices coming from underneath the pool. Several other students confirm this. School officials are notified and they come to investigate. They don't discern anything unusual, but it is noted that the lining at the bottom of the pool appears to be cracked. That same day, several female students report seeing faceless things instead of their own reflections in the mirror of the second-story bathroom during a passing period. Notably, these students don't seem to be bothered by this. It's framed more as an inconvenience rather than anything that actually scared them. During the lunch announcements, many students describe being able to hear a third voice speaking unintelligibly below the broadcast along with the two voices of the students broadcasting. The PA room where the announcements are being broadcasted sits in a media center near the pool where the students heard the voices coming from during class. Okay, so let's talk about what we know so far. I'm giving you this story not as it's written, but almost in kind of a roughly chronological order, just a way that makes it more interesting to retell in a way that the story makes more sense. Already we have students that are encountering strange things in the school, but no one seems to be alarmed by any of them. They're all just weirdly calm about the situation. We have two instances where kids bring up something concerning to adults, and the adults don't seem to care about it. Both Cassandra's mother and the school officials responded this way. We also have the instance of the voice coming from underneath the pool, as well as the voice being heard during the broadcast coming from a room near the pool. That's not a coincidence. And lastly, the teenage girls seeing the faceless things in the mirror instead of their own reflections. That's obviously super creepy and is brushed over way too quickly. Something that the story does so well and is very unique with is that it'll bring up something very eerie or unsettling and act like it's just totally normal. To me, that just makes this all so much more unnerving. That's one of the reasons why I think this story is so brilliant. It's almost like it's trying to trick the reader into thinking nothing crazy is going on. That fits very well with the themes that we'll talk about later. Also, if you're a fan of the SCP Wiki and you're wondering why I haven't mentioned anything to do with the actual organization of the SCP Wiki, I'll get to that later, but let's move on to the next couple days now. Tuesday, June 20th. Students arrive at the school and notice that the Indiana state flag is more than 3 meters above the top of the flagpole, attached to nothing. The American flag is gone. So if you can picture it, the flag is literally like glitching like a video game would. It's just floating in the air, removed from anything that should be holding it up. When observing the flag, students claim that they can see 9 female figures hanging by ropes from the flagpole, which disappear immediately after being seen. This is our first mention of the cheerleaders, who will be very important going forward. Remember to keep them in mind and take note when they show up again. During a freshman biology class, one student's stance is seen rolling their eyes back into their head and descending suddenly into the floor and out of sight. They reappear shortly later above a ceiling panel in the corner of the room. Despite being unable to identify the student, several of his classmates insist it was just a joke. Several students describe seeing a student they did not recognize at the school on Tuesday. When pushed to give details of the student's appearance, none are able to do so. Apparently, the only defining characteristic of this student was a purple satchel with the word syncope written on the side in white embroidery. This satchel is actually really not that important. It's more of an Easter egg to another story in this universe, so you don't really need to put much thought into that. While cleaning the gym, a custodian reports seeing something standing at the bottom of the pool staring at him. Wednesday, June 21st. Upon arriving at the school, maintenance staff and custodians note that there is a full 2 inches of water across all levels of the school. Inexplicably, the school's principal, Dr. Irvin White, decides not to close the school. At 7:56 a.m., the entire school hears someone whisper the word hello in their right ear. I have to mention that the webpage that hosts this story has a hidden audio file embedded in the page that will play the sound of a kid saying hello in your right headphone at a random time. The first time I read this, I was in college and reading this super late at night in my bed with my headphones on, and that audio clip nearly sent me to another dimension. It was so freaky. That day, members of the school band realized that their instruments no longer produce any sound. However, when played, the students report seeing a small black human-shaped thing flickering in and out of view in the corner of the room facing the wall. One student, Ava Lightaway, witnesses a dark figure walking up and away from the school through the air at an impossible angle. Eventually, the figure disappears from sight and is never seen again. No other students address this. I know it seems like I'm just piling more and more weird things on you and I'm not really explaining any of it. I promise I will get to what is actually going on later. Although I should say that not everything in the story seems to have a concrete explanation. There seems to be a cause to all of it, but you won't fully understand everything by the end of this. That doesn't mean that there isn't any satisfaction to be found in piecing the puzzle together, but an essential part of this story is that there are mysteries with no solid answers. Thursday, June 22nd. During a gym class, senior Nate Bennett avoids a dodgeball when it phases through him. As he begins to sink into the floor, he screams for help. Nobody who noticed seemed motivated enough to help him. The entire school shifts roughly a foot off of its foundations at 11:23 a.m. The vice principal sent to inspect it describes something small with too many faces grinning at him from underneath the building before the school slowly resettles. The boys' locker rooms disappear and are replaced by something that screamed. Witnesses are unable to provide any further details. As students leave the school for the day, they see 9 young women hanging in the air, tilted forward at a 45-degree angle, roughly 25 meters above the school's parking lot. They can be seen silently mouthing words. All witnesses describe their appearance as ugly and unremarkable. They vanish at roughly 3 p.m. The majority of all residents describe hearing a child's voice say, "Hello," below them at this time. A panic ensues as town officials have no response for the women in the sky. The principal decides to close the school on Friday. Friday, June 23rd. The entire student body shows up for school on Friday. Being unable to get into the school due to the doors being locked, they assemble outside the front door and wait. No individuals in this group could describe why they were there. There was a knock on the window, and the entire student body sees a small, black humanoid form standing outside of a second-story classroom. The figure begins to phase in and out of the window. The figure disappears and then begins to phase in and out of other windows in the school. Witnesses describe its movements as jerky, erratic, and spasmodic. The figure disappears and the front door unlocks itself. The student body enters the school. The interior of the school has become non-Euclidean, which means that the geometry of the physical space inside of school no longer obeys the laws of physics and mathematics. As students approach the back of the space, they realize they are moving down, not into it. All students now hear whispers, and some at the edge of the group hear drums in the distance. In the distance, they also see a stone archway that we'll talk about later. Suddenly, the entire mass of students shifts 50 meters outside of the space and are suddenly encased in rock and earth. The students spend roughly 20 seconds trapped in this area before reappearing back in the school. All students report being the only one in the building, and after wandering through the hallways for a short time, coming across a doorway below a doorway and entering a small sub-basement room near the pool. Inside, the students report seeing 3 separate visions. A woman crouched over a body of water, blood surrounding her feet, and her arms extended into the water up to her elbows. A farmhouse in the middle of a grove of trees that is burning, while 9 humanoid figures hang in the air overhead, and a weeping woman digging in a field until her hands begin to rot and fall apart. Once the visions subside, the small black humanoid appears. Students hear the entity say the word "hello" again, and are immediately surrounded by 9 screaming female figures. After that, they are suddenly back in their own homes. At this point, agents from the organization known as the SCP Foundation, a group dedicated to securing, containing, and protecting anomalous activity, enter the town of Salvation and start to apply methods of drugging and hypnosis to wipe the minds of all the citizens. I hinted to this organization earlier. This story is part of the SCP universe, and what we are reading is actually the case file that the organization wrote up after containing this anomaly. Later on, near the end of the video, we'll talk about the experiences of the agents that were sent in to investigate this anomaly, but for now, we're focused on the experiences of the citizens of Salvation. As additional agents begin to enter the town to apply amnestics, which are the methods used to wipe the minds of the citizens, additional anomalous activity is reported around the town. Several individuals report seeing bodies hanging in the sky. Several individuals also report turning on their taps and human hair and mucus flowing out instead of water. Several individuals report feeling as if their facial features had disappeared entirely, while several others reported seeing faceless creatures in town. A completely still black humanoid entity is seen frantically appearing and reappearing in rapid succession up and down the main thoroughfare in the town. Also, I feel the need to specify that when I say a black humanoid entity, I'm talking about an entity that is completely shadow looking, complete darkness. That's what that's referring to. One unidentified woman reports witnessing a weeping young woman running back into the school building. After following her into the now unlocked sub-basement, she is unable to find the young woman. She is the first to report a collapsed section of the floor in the sub-basement that leads to a stone archway with the poem from the beginning written on it, and I'll read that again now. The way below winds deeper, longer, unspeakable, its patterns laid, the lost forever damned to wander, this thing a quiet madness made. This writing has not been identified as existing in any other written work. It seems to be completely original to the stone archway. Over the next couple days, Foundation agents continue to apply their amnestics routine, and most of the town is convinced that the things that they saw were hallucinations. They are fed the story that toxic gases have blown into the town from a nearby factory, and that is what caused them to see all these visions. Despite this cover story, the visions were all real. At the end of the week, contractors are sent to assess the damage in the sub-basement of the school from the collapsed floor. They find the stone arch leading to a dark passageway. The Foundation then takes over the investigation quickly afterwards. With that, we reach the end of the first major section of this story. There are still 3 more sections to cover, however, but I want to summarize what we've covered so far. So something really strange is going on at the high school, obviously. We see tons of instances of people disobeying the laws of physics or hearing strange noises or speaking in their ears. We are told of a black humanoid entity, this shadow creature, that appears throughout the school. It seems this entity is the one saying the word hello to everyone, and it's described as having too many faces at one point as well. The other major incident that keeps cropping up is the appearance of the 9 female figures that hang in the air and sometimes appear faceless. I'm going to tell you now that these 9 figures are the cheerleaders of Salvation High School. The students appear to be very dismissive of the strange activity that is happening around them, and even show up to school one day when the school has been fully closed down. And also, the school isn't closed down and the anomalies aren't addressed until the 9 cheerleaders appear floating in the air above the parking lot, and the school officials are unable to explain their presence. The students enter the school where things are clearly not right, and they're teleported into the earth at some point, like literally encased in the ground, which is absolutely horrifying and sounds so claustrophobic to me. We're then told that everyone sees 3 distinct visions, and these are, in my opinion, the most important piece of the puzzle. I'm going to explain what I think all of these visions are representing. But before we get into that specifically, I want to cover the 2 remaining sections of the story pretty quickly, because they give us pretty much everything else that we need to solve this mystery. And trying to explain those visions without these next parts to it would make it just a little bit more confusing and less clear, so I want to explain all that to you guys now. The next section is a small list of anomalous activity that was recorded and witnessed by staff of the Foundation while they were occupying the town of Salvation. Reports of a figure dressed as a Foundation agent who tries to direct individuals towards the high school. The figure disappears if observed for too long. Remember that the purpose of the Foundation is to contain the anomaly, and this means ensuring that no one else comes into contact with the school, and especially the stone archway. So this figure is important because it shows us that this anomaly appears to want to tempt people into entering the school and possibly entering the stone archway as well. Agent Wills reported seeing a small black figure sitting underneath his vehicle upon approaching. After looking beneath his vehicle, the figure was not there. Afterwards, Agent Wills reports always seeing the black figure in his peripheral vision. This is my personal worst nightmare. Constantly having this bizarre entity just outside of reach would seriously mess with my head. That idea is just super freaky to me. Many reports of sounds coming from a grove of trees near the high school. Examination of the grove returned only a dilapidated 1-bedroom house and 9 data expunged in the backyard. The appearance of 9 hanging female figures drives off the exploration team. Further examination of the grove was unable to locate the house. After dark, many agents report seeing the 9 female humanoid entities jerkily moving towards them in the dark, only to slide into the earth or fade away before reaching them. Several reports of similar figures up in the trees. Reports of several bodies, no more than 9 at a time, that float up from the bottom of a small pond outside of the town and rest at the surface of the water before sinking and disappearing. Likely connected in some way to the 9 data expunged that appeared behind the house in the grove. The expunged data in this story is really interesting. I am still not completely certain as to what exactly they're trying to hide, My guess is that it's what's known as a cognitohazard. A cognitohazard is something that poses a threat to somebody if they know about its existence. So even knowing what they saw back there would cause the reader, like ourselves, to suffer some of the hallucinations that the people in the town are seeing. We're actually going to have a cognitohazard show up a little bit later in the story that I'll explain, so I think it fits with that, just in the way that the story works. My personal guess is that they are graves, like 9 graves for the 9 hanging cheerleaders. They say that the 9 bodies in the pond are related to the 9 things in the backyard as well. Graves would make sense for that. The 9 cheerleaders are almost always described as hanging, and at some point they're said to be hanging from ropes. But for a reason that I'll get into later, I don't think like the actual bodies of the cheerleaders would be there, but I do think the 9 things that the story's not telling us about are related to the cheerleaders and might even be like their uniforms or something. It has to be related to them though, just for the story to make sense. But this grove of trees and the house is going to be an important part of the story going forward, so keep that in mind, and keep in mind that it does relate to the cheerleaders. The next portion of the story is an interview conducted by Agent Ryan Ames in 2002 with Mrs. Valerie Fletcher, who was a teacher at Salvation High School during the period of anomalous activity during 1976. So remember that everything that we've covered so far has taken place way back in 1976, and this interview is taking place almost 3 decades after the experiences in the town, and all these people should have been convinced that those visions were just hallucinations. Agent Ames, can you tell me about your time in Salvation? Also, before I get into this, I will be saying the names of the person speaking before their little segment where they speak, so just don't be confused when I say names all over the place. Agent Ames, can you tell me about your time in Salvation? Mrs. Fletcher, oh, well, you know, I already told you about the memory loss. Just can't seem to string anything together anymore. I was a teacher though. See, I taught English, I believe, and yes, I was in Salvation for some time. We can see here that the amnestics have clearly worked to some extent on Mrs. Fletcher, but she is still able to recall certain things that happened when she taught at the school there. Agent Ames, what can you tell me about the town? Anything you remember that stands out? Mrs. Fletcher, well, it was quiet, you know. 1 road in and 1 road out. We didn't get many outsiders, so we were a pretty tight-knit community. I don't think we even had police, you know, because who would need them? We didn't have crime, not really. There were always some people who would tell stories, you know. Agent Ames, yes? Mrs. Fletcher, what? Hello? Hello? Agent Ames, you were just talking about the people telling stories, Mrs. Fletcher. Mrs. Fletcher, oh, the young people would go out into the woods and get themselves all riled up about whatever spook or specter they thought they might be seeing out there. There were some things that were strange. Well, I don't know if they were actually strange or if it's just my memory giving me trouble again. Like, sometimes you'd be driving down the street and you'd see someone standing on the side of the road waving just like this. And you'd look back and nobody would be there. I think it was just the kids playing pranks on people. Agent Ames, what about the high school? Anything strange ever happened there? Mrs. Fletcher, high school? Agent Ames, where you were a teacher, Salvation High School? Mrs. Fletcher, yes, I was a teacher. I taught English, I think. Agent Ames, do you remember anything strange happening at the school? Mrs. Fletcher, no, I mean, nothing out of the ordinary. We did have a child disappear once, I think. The last she was seen was by the pool, and then nobody ever saw them again. I just think, well, I think they ended up saying they just ran away. Some of them were problem children, you know, and there's just nothing you can do about that trouble. Maybe it was better for them, I don't know. There were a lot of people in Salvation who had some strong opinions, and some of them didn't sit very well with the young people. Agent Ames, what do you mean? Mrs. Fletcher, oh, you know, the church was very important in town. We had a few, and almost everyone went, but we had, if I remember right, there was one girl who got pregnant, I think. I'm sorry, what were we talking about? I can't seem to... Hello? Agent Ames, a girl who got pregnant. Mrs. Fletcher, yes, out of wedlock. It was quite a scandal. I don't remember what happened to her, but I know a lot of people were very upset about it. You know, I don't remember that girl's name, no. But I do remember her coming to me one time and asking about something strange she had heard. She was pregnant out of wedlock. It was quite a scandal. I didn't want the boys to see, but she said she was sitting on the bleachers and kept hearing a knocking, like somebody hitting something. She didn't want the boys, didn't want them to. Agent Ames, Mrs. Fletcher? Mrs. Fletcher, I'm sorry. I'm just so all over anymore. She said she would see things sometimes too, but I don't know anything about that. She also, well, I don't know if I dreamed this or not, but I remember her saying hello to me too many times. all at once too, not like a greeting, like it was the only word she knew for a moment, like it was all she... Hello? Agent Ames, is there anything else about Salvation you remember? Mrs. Fletcher, it all blurs together after all this time. I seem to remember there was one time when somebody found a girl. Maybe the same, well, I don't know, but they were strung up in the woods like a hanging. I think they called it a suicide. One of the girls who did cheer, but it was somebody who, well, I don't know why they'd do anything like that. They had a note, they had written with, I'm sorry, anyway, a note in their hand, actually asked me to look at it to see if the handwriting was the same and everything. Agent Ames, what did it say? Mrs. Fletcher, oh, well, if I remember right, it was on one side. They just had just like a drawing, like a building, but strange somehow. I don't remember why. On the other, it was just a word written over and over again. I don't remember what it was. I think it was wet or something. You couldn't make it out. Very queer now that I think of it. What a strange thing to write just before you die, don't you think? Agent Ames, do you remember anything from the week you were evacuated? Mrs. Fletcher, no, well, I mean, the vapors were very strong that week from the factory. They said that we might experience hallucinations, and I definitely did saw something. Well, there was one day I imagined a child floating backwards into a wall, and then they suffocated. Heard him screaming and pounding against the wall. We all did. It was a strange hallucination. He stopped. I'm sorry, what am I doing here again? Agent Ames, we're just talking, Mrs. Fletcher. I'm here with the insurance company. You were talking about the hallucination, remember? About the boy in the wall? Mrs. Fletcher, oh yes, I'm sorry. I just don't remember quite so well anymore. The hallucination, though, I saw the boy go in and then we didn't hear anything else. Now that I think about it, that's very peculiar. The hallucination was very clear. He cried for a long time and seemed to be so afraid, but well, I seem to remember it not really bothering me. I think it might have just been a prank. Agent Ames, one last question, Mrs. Fletcher. After the earthquake, they found a room underneath the basement near the pool. Do you know anything about that? Mrs. Fletcher, no, I don't. No, nobody ever went into that room, but the janitors, I think, just storage though. I think that girl asked about the room once. She said, well, she heard things coming from it. She was very interested in it, I think, just before. Well, either way, but I don't know. I might not remember that right. I do. Well, some of the hallucinations, they told us not to think about them anymore, so I do try not to. But some of the other people who have and they aren't doing very well anymore. Agent Ames, thank you for your time again, Mrs. Fletcher. Actually, before I go, do you think you know anything about this? Agent Ames shows Mrs. Fletcher an image taken of the 9 unidentified female figures around the town. At this point, Mrs. Fletcher becomes noticeably pale and short of breath. Mrs. Fletcher, well, yes, I do. Those are that's the cheerleaders. They were, let me think. There were 10 of them, though. I think, unless something happened to one of them, there were definitely 10. And that is the end of that log. I will level with you guys. You will not be able to find a simple explanation of what this story is truly about. There is nobody who has solved this. I wanted to make this video so I could take my crack at solving it, but I also think this story doesn't really want to be solved. I think there's a lot of interpretation that you can do, which I really love. The very last piece that we're missing is a log that describes the Foundation agents entering into the stone archway underneath the school and talking about what they find there. But I'm going to cover that after I give you guys my explanation, because while the things that happen there are really freaky, I don't think they are necessary to explain what's actually happening in Salvation. The only thing that you should know is that the archway leads to a tunnel that eventually opens up to a large stone version of the high school, and this stone high school appears to be stacked on top of another stone high school, and it looks like it continues down like that forever. But the key to this entire story is the 10th cheerleader. We see the 9 hanging female figures all around town, but Mrs. Fletcher tells us that there was a 10th, the one that got pregnant. Her baby was conceived in the small 1-bedroom house they found out in the grove of trees that housed the 9 data expunged, potentially graves behind it. I think that this is where the cheerleaders would meet up with their boyfriends to make love. The town of Salvation is very Christian and very traditional, and sex before marriage would have been seen as sinful, but Mrs. Fletcher said that the youth pushed back against these traditions. So the house in the woods is where the cheerleaders would go, so they could be hidden away from the town, and it was a secret that they all shared together and promised to never tell. But eventually, one of the cheerleaders gets pregnant, the 10th cheerleader, and she isn't ready to be a mom and doesn't want the boys to know that she is pregnant. She wants to keep it a secret. Now, in another larger town, and maybe in a later time, she probably could have gone to see a doctor to potentially terminate the pregnancy or give it away, but that kind of thing isn't accepted in Salvation, so she tries to keep it a secret. But the secret eventually got out, and people knew that she was pregnant, and she started to be shunned by the other cheerleaders, although the cheerleaders were interested in knowing who the father really was. The other cheerleaders then seemed to be bullying the 10th cheerleader, making fun of her for getting pregnant, calling her somebody who screwed up her life. They just treat her very terribly. Eventually, throughout her pregnancy, the 10th cheerleader starts to hear something underneath the school. She hears a strange knocking sound, and is drawn to the room underneath the sub-basement. She eventually comes into contact with the small, black, humanoid entity that we have been seeing around for the entire story, the entity that keeps saying hello to everyone. And I believe she's lured into the stone archway, into the stone school beneath the school, and contact with this entity causes some really bad things to happen inside the 10th cheerleader's head, and she starts to adopt a strange speaking pattern where she says the word hello too much. It's important to understand that the reason that the 10th cheerleader is drawn to the shadow creature and seems to be almost hanging around with it is because she truly has nowhere else to go. Because Salvation has turned its back on her. The people that should be helping her are shunning her and bullying her, and instead of being treated like a poor girl that needs help, she is looked at as sinful and not like the rest of the town. The seeds of this reveal have been planted from the beginning. The story is all about bad things happening and no one's stepping in to do anything about it. I mean, we have a kid in the school that literally sinks into the ground, but no one seems motivated enough to help him. We have girls that hear talking from underneath the school, but are ignored by their parents when they bring this to their attention. We have a kid that falls through the floor, reappears glitching through the ceiling, and then the rest of the class says he was just playing a prank. They don't see it as an issue. And even when the school officials try to do something by shutting down the school after they see the 9 female figures in the air, the students show up anyway. It's just business as usual. So the pregnant cheerleader is abandoned by her community and starts to communicate with this shadow entity. This entity drives her mad, and having been failed by all the people that should care for her, she falls into the trap of this horrible influence. The shadow creature attempts to lure her into the stone school underneath the school, and she finds this school through the arch and enters into it. Through entering into this stone school, she has woken up the madness that lays underneath the town of Salvation, and the anomalous activity starts to spread to other people that aren't just the 10th cheerleader. The cheerleaders spiral into madness, and complete and utter loneliness turns into 2 of the 3 visions that the students at the high school saw when they entered the building on Friday. The first is a woman crouched over a body of water, blood surrounding her feet, and her arms extended into the water up to her elbows. This is the 10th cheerleader. She gives birth to her child in secret, and not wanting to be a mother and with nowhere else to go, she drowns the newborn baby in either the school's pool or the pond where the 9 bodies are seen later. It doesn't really make a difference either way, but I believe it was the school's pool. The next vision is that of this same girl weeping and digging in the field until her hands begin to rot and fall apart. This is the 10th cheerleader hurriedly burying her dead newborn that she just drowned in the pool. I don't think that her hands actually rotted and fell apart. That is more symbolic to show how corrupt and dead she feels after doing this horrible thing. And at this point, the 10th cheerleader is completely broken and is being called to by the shadow entity below the school, but amazingly, she's able to resist the call. She goes back to the house in the grove of trees and tragically hangs herself. She leaves a note that shows the stone school underneath the school on one side and the word hello written over and over again on the other side. I believe this note wasn't just the scrawlings of a crazy person, but a warning. Her mind was almost completely gone, but she let the people that would find her body, the other cheerleaders, know that the source of this hello was underneath the school. Remember that it seemed like nobody else knew about the grove of trees, so she knew the cheerleaders would find her because they were the ones that would go there. I think that the 10th cheerleader, although shunned and bullied and mistreated by everyone in the town, used her last moments to defy the call of this darkness and warn those that bullied her to avoid her same fate. And though her intentions were noble and she owed absolutely nothing to the town, The madness had already been released at this point. It refused to be ignored, and that is when the anomalous activity started. The shadow entity would start to communicate with the rest of the students, speaking unintelligibly under the ground during the PA broadcast. And this would be ignored by almost everybody except for the other 9 cheerleaders. Though they were warned by the 10th cheerleader, they were eventually lured into the school underneath the school. They were taken by the stone structure and the strange shadow entity below it and turned into the faceless floating entities that would haunt the town, becoming a presence that could no longer be ignored. Because ignoring someone that needs help and pretending like it's just an isolated incident just adds fuel to the powder keg that will eventually explode. The faceless cheerleaders are described as being unremarkable or even ugly, and they are now branded with the insults that they used to throw at the 10th cheerleader when she needed their support. But also, the cheerleaders act as a metaphor for the spreading of suffering that happens when a tragedy occurs. They thought they could other the 10th cheerleader, but now they are all her. They're seen hanging from ropes. They are seen as coming to the same fate as the 10th cheerleader, because they should have been treated as equals to her, not better than her. And so we see the last vision, a farmhouse burning in a grove of trees, while 9 humanoid entities hang in the air overhead. This would be the 1-bedroom house that they would frequent with their lovers, where the 10th cheerleader hanged herself. Now the symbol of their secrecy and alienation burns. There is no place where they can shamefully hide away. Their secret lives are known to everyone, and the entire town suffers the consequences. The anomaly continues to spread as more and more people see the shadow creature. They see it clip through walls and smile at them with too many faces. The girls in the 2nd-story bathroom see their reflections replaced with faceless things. They aren't bothered, but they don't realize that they are seeing what they will become if the issues in Salvation are not addressed. They will all go the way of the faceless cheerleaders if they continue to ignore the problem, just continue to pretend that nothing bad happens in Salvation. Continue to pretend that everyone goes to church on Sunday and nobody has an issue with that. Continue to shun those that need help, those that make decisions that Salvation doesn't really agree with. The music from the instruments of the band are replaced with the appearance of the shadow creature. Their voices have been symbolically taken away, just like the 10th cheerleader was not heard. She didn't have a voice. And in the absence of that voice, the shadow creature, always there, always present, always hiding in the peripheral vision of those who see it, but never addressed, never confronted. A weeping girl runs into the school and leads another girl to the sub-basement where they find the stone archway. The madness of the school is finally making itself known to everyone. And in attempting to contain this madness, the Foundation screws up. They attempt to use amnestics to make the town forget what they have seen, what should be addressed in the open. They divert roads from Salvation. They say that all of the visions were caused by toxic chemicals, and they ignore the problem just like Salvation always did. And they must have realized that this was a mistake, because 25 years later, they realized they didn't have the full story, and they go to interview Miss Fletcher, but she has a hard time remembering. But she is clearly affected by what she saw. Although she is nearly convinced that it was all hallucinations, she still retains a quirk from those that witnessed the madness of Salvation. She inserts the word hello at random times during her sentences, just like the 10th cheerleader did. So while the Foundation attempted to eradicate all memories of Salvation, they were unable to contain the seeds of the madness underneath the high school. The image of that shadow creature with too many faces smiling at you and whispering hello into your right ear. The madness beneath the school existed long before the 10th cheerleader did. Her circumstances did not cause this anomaly, it was always there. But the anomaly seemed to be contained. It couldn't quite infect the rest of the town. It needed exactly what the 10th cheerleader did. It needed someone to listen to it, someone to acknowledge it. And with the cheerleaders and the madness's mutual need for company and acknowledgement, they found each other. And now the madness under the school is everyone's problem. And all of this could have been prevented if Salvation had only truly taken care of those that needed the most help. Because Salvation isn't a quiet town. It's not a town where everyone thinks the same. It's not a town where everyone goes to church on Sunday and all the kids stay out of trouble. Salvation is a town made up of human beings, and human beings make mistakes sometimes, and pretending those mistakes don't exist doesn't make the problem go away, it just makes them worse. And that is really the main theme of this entire story. It's ignoring problems and ignoring people that need help, and how that comes back to bite everybody and results in tragic consequences. And now that I've covered that main theme of this story and why this is all happening for the most part, I want to talk about the last section of the report that I haven't gotten into yet. The Foundation took over the investigation of the school upon discovery of the stone archway underneath the collapsed floor in the sub-basement. Previously, a group of contractors were hired to fix the issue, and they were sent into the stone archway. 11 contractors were sent in. These weren't Foundation personnel, just 11 poor strangers. And 11 were sent in and only 2 returned. The other 9 were never recovered. And it's interesting that this space underneath the school seems to have a fascination with the number 9. It keeps showing up. So the Foundation comes in and decides to send 3 of their agents into the anomaly. The report then gives us the transcriptions of the audio and video recordings of the agents. Agents Ellis, Porter, and Haskell are sent into the anomaly. Each of them has a shoulder-mounted flashlight, a microphone, and a video camera. Ellis. Alright, so first things first. There's definitely something happening back here. The walls are getting pretty tight, stay close. The team proceeds through the stone arch and into a sort of cave below the school. They can't see the main structure underneath the school yet, and they don't know what's there. Porter, can you feel that? Ellis, what? Porter, the air feels funny. Haskell, yeah, and the walls. Look. The shoulder-mounted flashlights illuminate the walls next to Agent Haskell. There are images carved into rock that looks similar to a child's drawing. It seems that the entity underneath the school, this shadow creature, takes the shape of a small child. Part of me thinks this might even be the child that the 10th cheerleader drowned. But we know for almost certain that this entity existed before the 10th cheerleader gave birth, since she was called underneath the school by it while she was still pregnant. My theory is that this shadow being is composed of many different entities, with the dead child being one of them. It is the sum of all of the shameful secrets of salvation. That would explain why it's described as having too many faces. It's literally composed of more than one entity. That's the only way that that description makes sense to me. Agent Ellis, come on. I think I feel a breeze. Might be an opening up here. The team continues to push through the rock tunnel towards the source of the breeze. Porter, I can barely move. The walls are too close. Ellis, Porter's camera goes black and then shows an image looking up at 2 sources of light, likely the 2 flashlights from the other agents. Porter has fallen into a deep, deep pit, and he screams as he falls. Ellis and Haskell panic and hear something coming up behind them. They push through the narrow tunnel and call for backup. They need a crew to pull Porter out of the ravine that they think he's in. They look at the large chamber they are in, and they see a stone structure that resembles the high school. It is covered in fog and is only accessible by a bridge leading to the front door. The structure extends both up and down into the fog, and they're unable to see where it ends, but it's already an impossible space. They should only be a couple feet underneath the school because they're just beneath the basement. They then notice that the stone school is stacked on top of another stone school, which is stacked on top of another one. It's schools all the way down. I think this is a great bit of symbolism. This stone school could be seen as the representation of the darkness under the surface of salvation. It just keeps going down and down with no end. It shows that if the people of salvation were to start facing the issues in their community, they likely would find no end to all the problems that people have. Everyone is suffering in their own way, but they're scared into silence and conformity. As the agents look at the school, they see the 9 faceless cheerleaders appearing in the air in front of them. The cheerleaders then teleport 10 meters backwards over and over until they're at the entrance to the school. For a brief second, the faces of the cheerleaders become visible and the agents noticeably recoil. The cameras are too far away to pick up what they're seeing, however. I think the ugly faces of the cheerleaders represent the ugliness that was inside of them as they bullied the 10th cheerleader to suicide. Their ugly secret is out for the world to see now. There's also another reason that I'll get into in a little bit that might explain their kind of disgusting faces, or these faces that make people recoil, but we'll talk about that in a bit. At this point, the agents are concerned and freaking out, because why would you not be? They hear the hushed voices of many people speaking in the distance, and thinking that these are the contractors that went missing, they press on. They enter into the stone high school and find that it is an exact replica of the one above. They don't hear or see any entities inside with them. The men remark that the geometry of the school makes no sense. They say it is like they're looking at the whole thing, even though that should be impossible. They're seeing the entire school at once. This doesn't really have anything to do with the story necessarily, but it's a cool bit of almost like cosmic impossible horror that I think this story does really well. The agents move through the hallways and the cameras pick up visible faces staring at them through the glass panes of the windows to the classrooms on either side of the hallway. The agents do not notice this, and they hear the sound of voices coming from behind the doors to the auditorium. Agent Ellis opens the door, and his video recorder immediately disconnects. Agent Haskell screams and scrambles backwards as the voices in the room start to grow louder and louder. The 9 cheerleaders appear and suddenly surround Agent Ellis. The cheerleaders move with erratic, jerky movements as they bend their bodies into impossible shapes. They close in on Agent Ellis, and then he and the cheerleaders disappear. Agent Haskell turns around and runs into the hallway, and as he runs down the halls, he can see the cheerleaders approaching him from over his shoulder, and he begs for help. He turns around again to see the 9 cheerleaders floating behind him, but no longer moving towards him. They hang in the air motionless, almost in anticipation for something. Agent Haskell then turns around again. He comes face to face with a small black humanoid creature sitting upside down on the ceiling of the hallway. The creature has no discernible features, and it says, "Hello?" The figure creates a distortion in Agent Haskell's camera, and there is a loud, low sound like a bell tolling. The sound continues for 20 seconds, and then the video feed goes completely dead. There is a snapping noise, and the audio feed goes silent. All 3 audio signals from the agents then turn back on and begin responding, and we hear what each agent is saying. Agent Ellis, just wants to be. Wouldn't you like to just be? Yeah, we would all die. We would all die. No more of the 9, we would all, they're back. Your guess is as good as mine as to what this means. It reads like the ravings of a lunatic, but also that's what people might have said about the note that the cheerleader wrote. Remember, Agent Ellis was taken by the cheerleaders and seems to be communicating with something now. It is silent for 81 minutes after this. Notably, 81 just so happens to be 9 squared. I didn't pick up on that until I wrote the script for this video. I didn't pick up on that 81 was like 9 squared in the context of the story. I knew that 81 was 9 squared before I wrote this video. Agent Haskell, wall is like every other wall. This hall is like every other hall. Down and down and down and down. No more, please. No more down. Can't go down anymore. Can't go. This is telling us that the schools keep going down and down, and it appears that Haskell is sinking through them rapidly. We get 18 more minutes of silence, 9 times 2 this time. Agent Haskell, Ellis, can anyone hear me? Does anyone know who I am? I can't see the light anymore. I can't see. It's only dark. It's only dark down here. I just want to see the light again. Silence again for 9 minutes. Agent Haskell now laughing and speaking incoherently. 10th is down below. The 10th is madness. Woke it up. There are 9, but the 10th is down below. Please just make it. Now, this is a line that gives a lot of people trouble and gave me a lot of trouble when I first read this story. We have Agent Haskell saying that the 10th is down below, and I used to think that this was referring to the 10th cheerleader. I now believe that this is actually referring to the shadow entity. The 9 cheerleaders seem to act as some sort of emissary or servants to the shadow entity with too many faces. This is shown when the cheerleaders stop chasing Haskell and float in the air in anticipation, only for Haskell to turn around and find himself face to face with the shadow creature. And we know that the 10th cheerleader hanged herself in the woods, so it wouldn't make sense for her to be down here. At least it wouldn't make sense to me personally, but the story is also about like bending reality, so you could be forgiven for thinking that the 10th cheerleader is also down here. I just prefer to believe that the 10th cheerleader was attempting to warn the rest of them, and that's why she left the note at the stone school and ended her life. I think her sacrifice adds a really emotional and devastating element to the story, so that is the theory that I'm going with. I also like to think that the 10th cheerleader is the hero in this story and that she made it out of the stone school and ended up, even though she died, she wasn't lured back down there. Back to the audio log, we get 9 more minutes of silence before the sound of Agent Porter screaming. We then get another 9 minutes of silence. Agent Haskell, I see you down there. You want me to come in? You want us all to come down and be with you down? And then presumably we get the sound of Agent Haskell drowning. I think this is the shadow entity sitting at the bottom of the pool, enticing Agent Haskell to come down. That was the image that we got earlier in the story, so it tempts Haskell to come into the pool and then drowns him. I also think that this is probably how the 9 cheerleaders also died. I mentioned earlier that they were seen sometimes hanging from ropes, but I think that this was done almost as a mockery or symbol for the 10th cheerleader. Water is another recurring motif or theme in this story. The school floods one day and 9 bodies are found in a pond at some point. The tap water in some houses is replaced with hair and mucus. If the shadow entity is killing people by luring them into the school and then drowning them, then that would be consistent with the way that the 10th cheerleader also killed her child. And it could also account for the seemingly revolting faces that the cheerleaders have. They could be like bloated, withered faces that you would see from a drowning victim. After Agent Haskell drowns, we get another 9 minutes of silence, followed by Ellis saying, "Fall forever," over and over again with the sounds of wind rushing. Presumably that's the sound of him falling through the air. 9 more minutes of silence before we hear Porter again. He says, "Goes on forever, it goes down forever. We're in here forever, just more of the 9, more of salvation down forever and ever. None of them got out, none of them got out, none of them got out." Then we get the sound of static, and then the sound of Porter crying, and after that, an unidentified voice says, "Hello?" End transmission. And that is the end of the Foundation's last attempt to explore the stone structure. They would eventually relocate all of the citizens of Salvation and the town would become abandoned. That also covers the last material found in the report. It still feels like there are so many pieces missing, but we understand the broad strokes of what happened there. So to sum it all up one last time, Salvation is a quiet town that ignores its problems. The cheerleaders meet up with their boyfriends in the small farmhouse in the grove of trees to fool around. One of the cheerleaders, the 10th cheerleader, gets pregnant and tries to hide it from everyone, and she's bullied by the other cheerleaders and ignored by everyone else in the town. In this loneliness, she eventually starts to hear the sound of something underneath the school calling to her and becomes fascinated with a particular room in the sub-basement. She's lured to this room by a mysterious shadow entity and enters into the stone archway and finds the stone school down below. She sees the shadow entity who says hello to her, and then she leaves and continues to see this entity all over the place. Her mind starts to deteriorate as she starts to pay attention to the shadow creature, and she starts using the word hello in random points in her sentences that make no sense. She is lured back into the school by the shadow creature and gives birth to her child. She then drowns the newborn in the school pool and, instead of entering the chamber below the school, escapes and buries the baby in the field behind the farmhouse in the grove of trees. She decides to end her own life by hanging herself and writes a note in an attempt to warn the others about the school. She draws the stone school on the note. Her mind is almost completely gone at this point, and she's so traumatized that she's only able to write the word hello over and over again on the other side of the note. This is to warn the others that the source of the hello comes from underneath the school. The cheerleaders find her body along with the note, and the note itself seems to have a strange effect on those that read it, and they begin to see the shadow creature themselves. The shadow creature lures each of the cheerleaders into the school. They enter the school weeping and find the stone structure below. They enter the stone school and are led to the pool. The shadow entity waits for them sitting at the bottom of the pool and then drowns them, either individually or all at once, and they become the floating, faceless cheerleaders seen around town. The shadow creature, now fully acknowledged by some people on the surface, begins to appear to other people in the corners of their vision, and the town attempts to ignore this. The strange anomalies from the stone school below start to leak into the school above as more and more people become aware of its existence, and this is when all the bizarre events start to take place. After the town fully acknowledges the existence of the 9 floating cheerleaders, panic spreads through the town, and 11 contractors are sent in to investigate the sub-basement. They enter into the stone arch and presumably the stone school, and only 2 of them return, and the other 9 are taken and presumably drowned by the shadow creature. The Foundation sends their agents in, and they meet the same fate as the contractors and the cheerleaders. It is decided that the Foundation cannot remove the anomaly, and they attempt to contain it by turning Salvation into a ghost town. The people of Salvation are given amnestics and fed a story about a nearby factory releasing toxic fumes that made them hallucinate. Salvation is abandoned at this point. Years later, the Foundation approaches Mrs. Fletcher, the English teacher from Salvation High School, for an unknown reason, potentially because they realize they don't know much about what actually happened in 1976. They could also just be trying to check in and see just how well their amnestics worked, but either way, Mrs. Fletcher remembers the 10th cheerleader and that she confided in her. When they found the suicide note, they brought it to Mrs. Fletcher, who identifies the handwriting, but seeing the note causes her to start to adopt the strange hello in her speech pattern. That's what I mentioned earlier about there being a second cognito hazard. I think this note caused her to adopt this speech pattern. I think that's why she's doing it. She recalls some other strange incidents but can't remember everything, and then she is shown the picture of the cheerleaders and is noticeably uncomfortable, remembering how they used to haunt the town. She then reveals that there were definitely 10 cheerleaders, and we know that the 10th cheerleader was part of that group but was removed for some reason and is the key to all of this. The Foundation then decides to close its investigation, preferring to leave it a contained mystery rather than trying to truly understand the actual madness underneath Salvation. I love this story. I think it's so creepy. It has that quiet horror that always freaks me out, and the images of like the faceless cheerleaders hanging in the air is one that has always stuck with me since I first read this. I think the themes of buried secrets and ignoring ugly issues are really interesting, and I like how all of the horror in this story is in service to those themes. It makes it all feel very cohesive and connected. The story leaves a lot up to interpretation in a way that is really interesting rather than frustrating in my opinion. I've seen some other interpretations and I could change what I think about all of this later down the line. You get just enough of the picture to be really creeped out, but never enough to fully understand what is actually like physically haunting the town, and it just makes the entire experience very unsettling to me. The idea that this 10th cheerleader was ignored and bullied, but still tried to prevent the others from being drawn into the school is very powerful, and it just speaks to the tragedy of it all. Salvation ignored the 10th cheerleader because she was sinful or a bad kid or trouble, but she proved herself as someone that wanted to help everyone else even after she went completely mad. This thing A Quiet Madness made is what happens when a society fails to protect the people that it should. It's what comes of those buried secrets and attempt to sweep things under the rug. It's a reminder that those unpleasant things that we try to avoid never truly go away. They just pile up over time until they're too big to ignore, just like the stone skull went down forever until it made its way to the surface and became everyone's problem. I think this is one of the most underappreciated stories in the SCP universe, and I am shocked that I haven't found more videos that talk about what this story might actually mean. So I figured I would try to shed some light on this and give it my own personal interpretation. Through all of the hauntings and voices and madness, it's really just a story about isolation and helplessness. Though it may disguise itself as a ghost story, it's truly just a simple case of loneliness and desperation and what happens when we ignore those that need our help. Salvation, Indiana is not a special town. Salvation, Indiana is not an isolated incident. Salvation, Indiana is everywhere, and that's what makes this so terrifying to me. Thank you so much for watching this video. This is definitely a passion project of mine, and I hope that I was able to introduce some of you to the story if you've never heard of it before. Hello. Thank you so much for watching this video. Hello. So sorry if that spooked any of you guys. I had to throw a spooky hello in there. So I know some of you guys watch my videos because I don't do spooky things. So if that freaked you out, then one, awesome for me because I like doing scary things, but also don't expect that in my videos going forward. I just had to do it for the story. This is definitely a passion project of mine, this particular video, and I hope that I was able to introduce some of you to this story if you've never heard it before. Definitely go check out the original story. It's a really quick read and like actually a quick read. I know I've called things quick reads before and they're like 50 pages long. This one really does just take a couple minutes to get through, like maybe like 15 or 20 minutes. And then you might have a different view of the things that I do. You might pick up on something that I didn't pick up on. I know every time I read this, I pick up on something new, so I'm sure you will too. If you have your own personal theory about what is really happening in Salvation, then let me know in the comments down below. I would love to see more discussion on this particular SCP. If you haven't subscribed yet, then please do. Again, I cover all sorts of horror content, mostly horror literature. I'm trying to hit 50,000 subs by the end of 2025, which would be a really big stretch for me. I've also got other videos you can check out. I've got ones on All Tomorrow's, the video that I most recently made, some that are kind of longer on bigger analysis of certain books that I really love. I've got some on some very niche horror stories from a really interesting series. I've also got iceberg videos that cover a lot of different content from different kinds of media like disturbing books or creepy kids books or disturbing short stories. So check all that out if it sounds interesting to you. I put a lot of effort into these videos and really proud of the work that I've done. So please go check those out if you liked this video. If you want more SCP content, then let me know as well. I'd love to look through some of the more horror focused entries and see if I can find some like super creepy ones. So if you have some particularly scary SCPs, then please put them down in the comments below. If you want to support my channel further, then you can become a channel member for $3 a month, where you'll have early access to all my videos, access to exclusive videos, and also access to my members only book club. A massive thank you to all my gold tier members: Amanda Mapes, Saddest John, Lucas Fernando, Chris Lamb, Silent Trails, Blue Radio Media, Ezra, Coco Boko, Tyler the Leper, Lex, Vix Corner, B, Pyrocat, Missjoy16, Jenna Berry, and Cherry Shark. Your support really does mean the world to me. I'm so glad you guys support me. I'll have a new video going up for you guys about me talking about some videos I'll be doing in the future, and I can't wait to talk about our book club book with all of you guys here in the next week or so. But thank you guys all so much for watching again, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.